Well, hello there. It is time for Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, 11M6, 12M1, Leia is wounded, and kind of the fight starts with Palpatine and Luke and Darth Vader. Well, Darth Vader and Luke. Yeah, there's a lot in this queue, my word. So just sort of letting you take that in, first of all, that first page, and then go to the second one. This is sort of outside when Leia's wounded, stormtroopers freeze, and that's where she pulls out the gun. I love you, I know. As a sort of throwback to Empire. Then the scout water appears, but of course it's Chewie. And suddenly all the... there's a sort of almost like a sort of force, not quite a force theme, but a sort of joyous bom-body-dum, body-dum. Almost like a sort of reverse Imperial March thing, which is really interesting. I don't think that ever appears anywhere else, but I could be wrong. Then we've cut to Luke's fight with Vader. There's a couple of bars which kind of seem missing. And of course, I'm not doing the film version. This is what was written by Herb Spencer, basically, from the score. So there's another edit from somewhere else as well, just 3 bars or so. Not quite sure what that's from. And then we're into the that bit. Into that bit, Obi-Wan has taught you well. Vader approaches, and then we've got this incredible sort of artificial harmonics stuff, which there are numerous errors in the original, sadly. Trying to get everything on the page in this thing is really difficult sometimes. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that was cut from the film, which is really intriguing, actually. I'm not sort of sure whether it could be that it went with little bits of lightsaber-y action, but I'm not quite sure, actually. So all of that's cut, and we just have these artificial harmonics, which I'll go into a lot of detail. And then your thoughts betray you, Father, Luke says. And then we have the Force theme and the horns, which is in an unusual key in E-flat minor at that point. But it's above a sort of D inverted pedal, and then eventually a B-flat pedal, then eventually it's back to E-flat. Then we're into this sort of throws his lightsaber, and then suddenly it's sort of Emperor-type stuff all the way to the end as well, which I didn't bother sort of... highlighting good, all this stuff. Good. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be a teacher and just go good to one of your students? That would be hilarious. Right, so let's get going with this. So we've got lots going on really. So let's just deal with sort of the harmony, what's going on basically. So if I sort of mixed modality, tonality, it's a sort of G Hungarian minor becoming E flat, and I say becoming E flat because it's sort of exemplified here where we have that chord like that. Very reminiscent actually of some of the battle sequences in Henry V by Walton. The only reason I know that is because I wrote it. I transcribed the entire thing orally, unbelievably, which is ridiculous to do that. But there we go. That was a job I did way back in the early noughties. Anyway, so we feel as though there's a sort of tertial shift. So that the reason why I think it's G Hungarian minor at the beginning is because if I play all of those notes, all of them seem to be present in a lot of the string work. And also, it sort of goes into that G minor, almost like an upbeat. And it's interesting, the way this is done is obviously in 4, but a lot of the strong accents that you get are actually on the weaker part of the bar in terms of the third beat of the bar instead of the first beat of the bar. Ba-bum, ba-bum, bum, ba-bum. Like that. So it's interesting how that kind of works out. And of course, we don't get to hear any of this at all. This is all deleted, which is a real shame. It's been replaced with 10M5 First Ewok Battle, bars 28 to 33. I'm just wondering, actually, now that I've said that, whether I can actually get them up. It might be helpful just to sort of see. I'll just have a look through this on my other screen, which you can't see. 10 and 5, where are we? Let's have a look at this. And I must thank one of my patrons for doing that, because I couldn't find out where it was. I just couldn't see where it had come from. So 28 to 33. Let's have a quick look at that. 28 to 33. Yes, so it's all of this sort of, you know, divergent progression. I'll just play it on the piano. That's it, and it cuts out just before then. Sorry, it's incredibly loud, actually, wasn't it? Wow. Seems to be sort of huge volume. So that, yeah, the main thing is that that sort of motivic development of the Ewoks, and this sort of A flat 7 with a flat 9. Basically. So that's kind of where it's from. So that's why I think I kind of went back to doing just the score, because it's sort of more helpful to see how Williams initially approached things. And I think this, does it take up the same amount of time? I'm not altogether sure. I don't really know without sort of time coding everything, and I'm really not going to do that. Anyway, so we have these sort of, sort of augmented stabs with going to a first inversion of E flat. And that sort of repeats. Dum-ba-dum, dim-ba-dum. Notice the slight change the fourth time around. He says, and I'm just going to go in here. Note here, JW goes back to the beginning chord, well, plus the seventh, as we've already had E flat to G to D 3 times. So it's that sort of idea in terms of just varying your material just enough to be a little bit more interesting. So here I've talked about the metric displacement. Here he avoids the C sharp third and the 7th chord sus4 voicing, and the 4th voicing is not heard in any of the brass, which is interesting. In other words, that is still there. That's why I've called it sus4. And we also get, so we've got that sort of with the C sharp is a bit more definitive. Boom, 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 boom. And I just don't think he wanted that. Like that. It seems to be that's what that is. And again, this is very modular. So we've got, what is it? 6 bars of that. And then suddenly we're into Leia's theme. But look at the bass line. Here we go. So we've got that. Like that. And also we've got this G minor major 7th type stuff as well. Which is interesting, and indeed, you know, a lot of the notes are actually contained in that sort of chord as well. So the harmony's kind of derived from the melody as well, with the bass line. And because we're in D major, we've got that D. Can't play it. There we go. And notice here there are so many instances of JW moving in 6th or 3rds in his bass lines. This sort of thing, like that. Just watch out for it. It's really interesting. You'll see it so often. This one is like a short long. The short long. But in fact, it's an inversion of the A to the F sharp and the melody. Like that. It's a bit of imitation. And also establishes the root a little bit later on as well, especially after a sort of dramatic shift from this material into that material. It's a bit of a delaying tactic, basically, to sort of smooth over the transition, because that's what John Williams is very good at, going from one thing to another in a very short amount of time. In addition, we've got this high trumpet part, which is a sort of octatonic counter melody, which again increases tension. So we've got that D pedal going on, and then suddenly we're back into the unison strings. By the way, we had unison strings before. And this is where it sort of climbs up to this F sharp here. Whoops. And it eventually goes to F sharp. So we're starting on G, and then it goes to F sharp, a sort of semitonal shift. Stormtroopers freeze, like that. And then we've got this really interesting sort of really weird sort of chords, sort of all non-functional chords. And in a sense, we've got this sort of weird French six, but it's not functional because it's not doing that. And it's not even doing that as a sort of disguised irregular one back to D flat. In fact, it doesn't have any function like that at all. It's just used as flavouring to that E flat minor with a major seventh and sharp 5. Brilliant jazz chord, basically. Something that he does quite a lot. So that's a minor third and another minor third. But between them, we have a sort of perfect fourth in terms of the first voice of that and the second voice of that. So it's a bit like, oh, I'm not, oh, yeah, what's going to go on here? And, you know, this is where I Love You, I Know. And then suddenly it all sort of hell breaks loose as well. We've also got a sort of nice, sort of interesting modulation again. Notice the 6 there modulates the E flat, the E natural to the E flat. Yes, because we're sort of here in C major. Like that. So we've gone down another little semitonal shift as well. This is a bit like, almost like a sort of 7th chord. Like that. But it's not really a suspension. Well, it is a split suspension. I meant a cadence. It's a triple suspension which doesn't resolve. Like that. And then a classic bit of Neo-Ryman sort of field day. So we're lots of tertial sort of things, and then even that transformation, and this one into a sort of chordal sharp 4 chord, or sharp 11 possibly, making it F minor with a sharp 4 because of the G sharp or the A flat at that point. But that works really, really nicely. So we've got trumpets and horns, or trumpets and trombones in octaves, which is very common. Really interesting how the oboes are sort of filling in that little harmonic gap in here. So we don't have 4 of the trombones because we don't have them in the thing. I wonder whether he still would have done that had he had 4 instruments anyway in each of those groups. Who knows? But it does fit with the strings as well. They've just sort of run with a harmony with one little scampering bit up. Like that. And then we're into this sort of scout walker, boy-yum, bum-bum, boy-yum, which is exactly what we had in the cue before. Really weird sort of voice leading, which happens where the violas go below the cellos, and I think the second violins go above the first violins. It's all very peculiar, all of that sort of stuff. And then we're into, oh no, what's going to happen? And then Chewie appears, and then suddenly it's... It's a bit like that. There's a sort of hint of that going. And it also almost feels related to Imperial March also to... yeah, and is it Yoda as well? I don't know. I mean, there sort of seems to be hints of so many different things. But anyway... I don't know. You know, the sort of typical 7th. And then hints of the Imperial March. And I wonder whether that's a sort of... Is that a sort of calling card in terms of where it cuts to Vader's fight with Luke? I don't know. It doesn't really seem to be going in that direction, but I wonder whether the sort of the nature of that is kind of then a precursor to this. Anyway, we're going in from this sort of E with a flat 6, that sort of idea. And then suddenly into that hint of Imperial March harmony at that point. And then we've got this F sharp now leads to a sort of standalone chord, this sort of G minor with a major 7th. Like that. I don't hear those trumpets at all on the soundtrack, so it could be that they were deleted. It's very, very high. That'd be sort of top E, a D and E flat for the first trumpet player if it's playing in B flat. Whoa. Yeah, that's gonna be difficult. It's also mezzo piano. Good luck with that. I mean, I guess it's with a sardine, so that's okay. By the way, sardine just means sordine. It's my silly little joke for mutes. Anyway, we're then into the Emperor's theme, where the synth is sort of taking over from what they've been doing there, and then just the usual sort of thing. Like that. And then we're into the Force theme. Obi-Wan has taught you well. Let the hate flow through you. You know, all of this sort of goading by the Emperor. Hilarious. And then, you know, we've got this really spooky, ghostly thing, which we've had sort of before, but it becomes even more to the fore. So when I first saw this, I just thought, well, God, you know, is there any pattern to any of this? And it's really difficult to kind of fathom what that would be. I think that's supposed to be up there, actually. Well, yeah, it is one of them anyway. So we've got this sort of bell-like synth, whatever that would be. And I'm not doing it at pitch. It first starts off almost like sort of Die Walkyrie from Wagner. You know, a bit like that. I don't know whether that was an allusion that he was drawn to, but it seems very, very similar in certain respects. With a sort of, let's call it chromatic neighbouring chord, just because they're all chromatically related to. And then it all goes sort of... And then it repeats. Like that, this little pattern here. And we hear it again. Just very, very slightly different with these two sort of obviously swapped over. So like that, and then I think it does the same thing. Not quite. So, yeah, it's sort of almost taking it up from the D and B flat bit from here. There. Do you see? So, there we go. Then we've got the A flat and the F. And then the A flat and the F. And then that bit there. And then eventually it sort of relaxes. So we've got all of that going on. So, yeah, in terms of the chords, C sharp minor, E flat, B. We've got sort of F sharp org, A org, F minor 6, F sharp 9 with omitting the 5th, but with the A sharp and the bass. And then it sort of begins again as well, but all over a C sharp pedal. like that. And it almost sounds like Messiah. It does use all 12 tones, but it's post-tonal, isn't it? It's you know, any time you've got a pedal, you can do whatever you want above the pedal. It doesn't really matter. You could have anything. Like that. It's just he's chosen to use 6 because I don't know why. It could be 666. You know, maybe that was something that was going through his mind. I have no idea. We'll never know. Probably reading far too much into it. Then we've got this interesting sort of octatonic like bit there, which didn't make it to the final cut. So I'm just going to sort of gloss over that really, but that's all sort of octatonic, and then it becomes diatonic. In other words, in a key. And then we're suddenly into sort of C minor with a flat 6. Going to that sort of amazing first inversion, almost recitative-like, as in the sort of opera. And then to D minor. I can't hear that sort of synthetic scale on the harp at that point. And then with a D inverted pedal, in E flat minor above that D, it ends up on the B flat. I think that should be, it's not clear that that is a B flat because of the bit here, but it should be. And then more bass line. Notice, look, 6. There we go. E flat minor over D, and then sort of C minor 7 with a flat 5. Like that. So it's sort of not quite a tritone sub, but kind of a hybrid of one. Another sort of jazz bit, which is interesting. Sort of a bit of a tritone sub, basically. And then we're back into the Emperor's theme, exactly the same. Here, just with lots and lots of doublings and things like that. Bassoons at sort of da-da-dum instead of digga-digga-dum, because they can't do that. But I probably could, actually, but it'd be a bit messy. And then we've got ending in G, and then this is surprising bit from G. Suddenly a weird half-tone shift at the end. Which is really weird. Almost like it's a reverse tritone sub, which sort of comes after the tonic. Like that as well, which is really weird. Anyway, and of course the A flat then overlaps with the next cue, so it could be that he wrote that little tag at the end. Good, you know. Sort of as Luke is sort of completely demolishing Vader, well, a bit later on anyway. So that's it. And I think maybe, yeah, it'd be sort of quite fun to talk about the orchestration, I think, with this one. So let's just go into that. I will bring that up for you. So Leia's wounded. Here we go. There's also an X bit of additional music as well at some point. Gosh, this is not particularly well done. Look at that. Awful. I could just sort of tidy that up very quickly. Let's see whether I can do it. I think it's one of these, isn't it? Let's just do that. Maybe it does that a little bit. I'm sure there was a way of doing it. I can't remember what it is now. I think it's, oh, there we go, the optimized selection one. Just couldn't remember what it was. There we go, it's a bit better. Anyway, so let's have a look. Is there anything sort of sensible that we can sort of do? Well, I said previously the trumpets and trombones just, you know, very often in octaves. Again, we don't hear this. There we go. And a little bit of sort of filigree. Here we go. And notice how the piano just helps that along a little bit. It's very sort of organ-like, isn't it? Like that. Especially, in fact, actually with the piano, it's less organ-like. Interestingly, it's a bit more percussive. And then when sort of, it does get sort of more plinky, the Glock sort of suddenly comes in with these sort of Stravinsky-esque, beow, beow, that sort of idea. Nobody else is doing that. Like that. It's a sort of another little technique. And then the third little thing that's going on is all of these unison strings as well. I think it's a lovely texture, especially with the pizzicato double bass. That's where it kicks in. So, interesting. Here we've just got melody. Is anything else playing the melody? Yes, it is actually. So we've got a blended sound, which is quite unusual. It's not the usual Hollywood norm. There we go. And then the stuff, the sort of padding in the middle, because there's no harmony, is all in the brass here. And then don't forget we've also got this little counter melody, if you remember from beforehand, which really cuts through. That doesn't have anything else going on with it. Yeah, I love how this sort of climbs up as well, with a little trill. Then the sforzando, sudden diminuendo, this time to mezzo piano. These are all sort of standalone things. Is there a... Yeah, it's interesting the timpani doesn't hit that particular bit. It actually comes later in beat 2, and then we have the ch. In this case, cymbals. It's not very clear that that is what it is, but it is cymbals. So that's interesting, just because I think most composers would have just put the, boom and that together on that downbeat along with the timp. Yeah, so it's almost like this is a punctuation after that. Dum, dum, which is interesting. Then we've got this really unusual little bit of harmony here. So we've got very, very low bassoons with the bass clarinet just basically doing what bassoon 1 is doing. So that's just this bit. Like that. Is anything else doing that? Boom, boom. No, it's not. So, but we do have the flutes doing this, which is going up. Like that in tritones. And that's being helped along with that harp. And then contrasted now with the, whoops, yeah, with the clarinets. Let's just listen to that. And of course, we're missing all of the other bit of the harmony. So let's just then play it. Let's just play just the wind and the harps, because I think the strings are just doing pedal F sharp. Wires. Whoops. Really annoying. Let's just do that. It's interesting how sometimes bassoons can sound quite like horns, which is sometimes why they're blended. When you've only got 2 horns, for example, you would blend with one bassoon or even 2 bassoons. So then, they take over that harmony. Here, typical sort of, 16th notes. Yeah. So interesting here, remember these oboes are getting into that harmony. Yeah, it just colours it very, very slightly. And then we're into that sort of big, you know, stuff here. Yeah. Like that. That's what I meant about the sort of strange sort of voicing. It's actually really effective. Incredibly effective. I love it. I think it's brilliant. And especially with all of that sort of stuff going on. In fact, it's all of that, isn't it? So we got the brass, which is kind of doing the same thing as the strings. And we've got the digga-digga-dum, along with a boom chush as well. Yeah, it's going to really stick out there with that contrabassoon very, very low. Not sure we can get away with it these days, but here we go. Interesting. Notice these horns, the fourth horn sort of dovetailing in between. Just gives it a little bit of rhythm. And, you know, the trumpet's sort of just helping it out there. Very unusual cello line here. Look at that. It goes way up. No violas. Yeah, interesting how those trombones just punctuate that D major bit there. And then we're into this bit. Very unusual pizzicato violas. Yeah, really, really can't do that at all on Note Performer. So let's go from that C sharp bit. Tuned gongs. Really weird, sort of, it's so exotic, isn't it? It's just very strange, and they all gliss between each of those notes. I didn't put it in just because the playback would just be terrible. But of course all that's happening here is they're just doubling here. Don't forget that's 2 octaves above as well. I think there's one bit where I think Herb had written a 5th above the note instead of a 4th by mistake, which is bonkers. So don't know why you would do that, but there we go. Just a mistake. They do happen occasionally. I'm sure the part prep person just corrected it instantly. So, and then we're into that sort of, do you remember the C minor E bit with the flat 6, then going to that D major with a first inversion. Yeah, so interesting, basses in octaves here, so you're dividing that section, but don't forget we've also got support with bassoons and contrabassoon and the tuba and the timp as well. So let's just do, in fact, just that bit. Oh, damn it. If you don't do it in one go, it kind of doesn't quite work. Let's just do that. This is just bass. Etc. would be digga-dum. Like that. So yes, it absolutely helps. Then we've got these winds, which are kind of an octave above the horns. Is anybody else doing that? No. So it's melody here. Like that. And then all the thirds filling in at that point. Notice that that's a really good voicing for horns above that first inversion. There's no duplication of the F sharp there, which you don't really want. And then quite thick sounding chords here. isn't that interesting? Second violin's above the first violins at that point. Really interesting. Can't explain it. Don't know why. Yeah, didn't hit the harp in there. So anything else? The usual bass and cello, sometimes with contrabassoons, sometimes not. And then here we go for the last little bit. Whoa. Yeah, with the sort of clarinet going berserk. Yeah, interesting. I mean, all harmony here. Doing something a little bit different from the strings, which are just doing this. There we go. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of effects on here, and this is just all chordal. Note, look how high that bass trombone is. Wow. I'm almost convinced they would have probably just played that on a different trombone. I don't know why I've got ties there. I think that's a slur. Yeah, that was a slur. Whoops. Yeah. By the way, that strange thing was this synth part, which just doesn't work on playback at all. Yeah, I was just sort of debating about this, because notice how these go above the brass. As the brass come down to the E flat, that's all sort of going above. So I'll just play the strings on their own, but I'll show you the brass. Yeah, really interesting sort of change of voicing in the orchestration. And quite wide as well in those trumpets and trombones and tuba. Like that. Having the bass as well. Yeah, that's kind of it, really. Everything else is just in threes. Yeah, interesting that the bass clarinets, actually there are two of them in this particular instance. I think that's just one clarinet at that point, playing the tune. And notice how the cellos are divided as well. So everything, here is sort of powerful. And then suddenly bass roll at the end. In other words, R-O-L-E, roll, not roll, as in brum. And then just a punctuation, A flat, right at the end. That's it, folks. That's Leia is Wounded, 11M6, 12M1. Hope you enjoyed that. It's a lot of content in there, really. Huge amounts. And a really good one, because it's sort of underscore this particular one. You've had a huge amount of action. And actually, it's quite fun to get sort of real underscore. You know, what are the solo instruments that are played? There are quite a few. I mean, often that you read sort of composition manuals and they tell you not to use solo instruments when somebody's talking. You can't get more solo and penetrating than a flute and a horn. Everyone has taught you well. But things are quite still in terms of we do have quite a lot of semi-breve type sort of stuff going on as well. So that is to be borne in mind. So I think that's it for now, and look forward to the next one. Sorry, it's taking so long to do that, because a lot of it's I'm reading just from Herb's score, and trying to decipher his handwriting is sometimes quite difficult, and I'm trying to not make errors as I go along. There will be some, obviously, but hopefully not as many as there would be if I did it much quicker. So there we go. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and